Christina Stabile, and I'm a freshman at Barrett studying supply chain management. For my honors contract, I will take a position against genetically modified organisms in food being produced in our world due to its link to the danger of the environment and health concerns for those who consume them. GMOs are often overlooked as many people do not have much knowledge about the benefits and drawbacks of GMOs, so this video will help to investigate these practices and their environmental impacts. Let's first review the impact of GMOs on the environment. Before I begin, it is important to know what GMOs are and some examples of crops that contain them. According to an article I read called The Influence of Genetically Modified Organisms on Agroecosystem Processes, it describes GMOs as biotechnology that can be used to modify traits in crops and animals much faster and more accurately than conventional breeding. Examples of GMOs include crop plants genetically engineered to express insect-resistant genes or contain herbicide-tolerant genes, bacteria engineered for enhanced nitrogen-fixing capabilities, and the animals genetically modified for increased growth rate. So, if we're genetically modifying the foods that we're putting into our bodies, we are going to see more of an impact to our health, as well as negative impacts to the crops and the environment in which the crops are grown, which we will explore a little later in the presentation. I chose this topic because the debate of GMOs is something that has gone on for many years, and there has been extensive research with support to both sides of the argument. According to researcher Kahn, many argue that genetically modified food from plants and animals present unknown health risks and pose a serious ecological threat. A further concern is that intellectual property rights and patents associated with transgenic crops may lead to market capture and monopoly pricing. This research and debate directly supports my argument against the inclusion of genetically modified organisms being used in our society due to their impacts and concern to the environment and the health of our overall society. There is also economic concerns brought up in this argument. Now that we've had an overview of the impacts of GMOs on the environment, it is important to assess the pros and cons of GMOs used in our food system. Some great contributions that GMOs have had to the food system are their environmental benefits, their participation in meeting food demands around the world, and overall benefits to farmers. Though we've talked a lot about the negative impacts of GMOs on the environment, there's also some pros to them as well. Environmentally, trait manipulation of target organisms and production systems components also creates opportunities for improved products obtained with more effective resource utilization and reduced negative environmental impact. Nevertheless, manipulated traits may introduce unforeseen effects on ecological processes. I understand that GMOs help to ensure that we have more effective crops and protect against weeds and pest control, but it is chemicals such as these that have long-term effects associated with these quick-fix benefits. Another great thing about GMOs is their ability to meet the food demands of our world, and this is also where a lot of controversy rises. The yield of maize, wheat, rice, and soybean has stagnated or collapsed over the last 50 years in several areas of the world, causing yield gaps compared with expected production. Agricultural management strategies that increase net crop production are therefore needed. Like it or not, our world is expanding exponentially, and thanks to GMOs, we're able to provide food all over the world more efficiently. This is definitely something that is sometimes overlooked as a positive outcome of GMOs, and an interesting point as a counter-argument. The last benefit of GMOs is its overall benefit to farmers. There exists a realistic prospect of organic farms becoming involved in genetically modified insect releases as part of an area-wide program or experiments. As a result of the two pros before this one, these crops make life a lot easier for farmers as they attempt to turn over their crops efficiently and provide for their farms. With new technologies such as these, farmers are able to test their crops and find new ways to improve their practices every day. On the other hand, GMOs also come with some disadvantages while implementing them into the food system. Specifically, their toxic effect on consumer health and the ethics and biodiversity being put at risk. Overall, there's a lot of issues that we need to address within ethical arguments of GMOs, and whether you are pro-GMO or against GMO, the differing levels of acceptance of such crops is what's important here. The differing levels of acceptance of GM crops across countries are thought to relate to the familiarity with GM technology and trust. There is significantly lower trust in regulatory authorities in Europe compared to the U.S., possibly because Europe has experienced a greater number of publicized food scares compared to the U.S. I found this really interesting, especially the comment about publicized food scares. This supports an additional argument about the impact of media on the understanding and awareness of GMOs, as well that leads to the acceptance of GMOs. Overall, the question that has stumped researchers for years is simply the ethics and trade-offs of GMOs and their continued impact on our health and our environment. When we're speaking in terms of environmental impacts, biodiversity is at a huge risk due to GMOs. The effects of GMOs on biodiversity has been discussed primarily in terms of the potential risk of species losses and the impact that a GM trait could have on the genetic diversity and subsequent ecosystem functioning in a given landscape. Let's take a moment to imagine life without GMOs. The image on the left is a field that has not been treated with GMO crops, and on the right is a field that has suffered the consequences of these practices. Without the use of GMOs, produce would be true to size and have healthful qualities that you would want to consume into your body. Though it is shown for ensuring food security and mitigating climate change, GM crops with desired traits such as insect resistance and herbicide tolerance, enhanced nutritional quality, tolerance to abiotic stress conditions have been developed. There are still some downfalls that should be assessed. So I'm sure you're probably thinking, are there any alternatives instead of using GMOs? Yes, there are more sustainable practices. For example, seed sovereignty and greener farming are both two great ways to help meet the demands of our world without using GMOs. A website called stopthecrop.org has a whole list of sustainable alternatives, and I found some really interesting other options that we can do to help our world in the future of our environment. It is movements such as these that really support these alternatives and spread awareness to using other options besides GMOs. Many others have joined the fight against the use and consumption of GMOs, including restaurants. Restaurants like Chipotle even have designated areas of their website that show their non-use of GMOs. On Chipotle's website, under the section about GMOs, it directly says that Chipotle is on a never-ending journey to source the highest quality ingredients we can find. Over the years, as we have learned more about GMOs, we've decided that using them in our food doesn't align with that vision. Chipotle was the first national restaurant company to disclose the GMO ingredients in our food, and now we are the first to cook only with non-GMO ingredients. Many other restaurants have decided to disclose their GMO ingredients as well, and get rid of GMOs in their ingredients altogether. And this is really inspiring and shows that we together, as our world continues to evolve and grow, can look toward other sustainable practices besides GMOs that will better our environment and our health as well. In closing, there are both positives and negative effects that result from implementing practices of GMOs involved. Just like anything else, it is important to assess both sides of the argument. As we continue to become more educated and research on this topic, we will continue to uncover more information about the environmental state of our world that genetically modified organisms are threatening.